Chris Jackson is really just an average guy. Is a guy who wants to do great things, who wants to leave a legacy for the people that he loves. I think that's probably one of the more important things in my life. More than that, though, I think I enjoy sports just like everybody else. I try to play it. You know what I mean? Every opportunity that I get. I'm a kid from Pontiac, a kid that was fortunate enough to be given a lot of different opportunities to ultimately go and accomplish whatever it is I want to accomplish. But my family has been in Pontiac and hasn't left, and I would say that neither have I. You know, so I may have gone in a different direction for a little while to try to build whatever assets in terms of talents and abilities that I had, but the plan has always been to come back to Pontiac and give back, just because of what Pontiac has done for me. So Chris Jackson is, simply put, a kid from Pontiac that ultimately just wants to see a progressive city, wants to see a great city, wants to see great people do great things. Chris Jackson is a man that has, I think, the confidence to do anything that he ultimately wants to do. And I think a lot of that is because of the people that I've always had around me, the people who've always believed in me and told me and bestowed on me that I can be whatever I wanted to be. Chris Jackson is a man who believes in people, who ultimately wants to see the best in people, who ultimately wants to leave a legacy that speaks to a greater fill in the blank. And at some point, I asked myself, you know, what does that mean for Pontiac? And how can I give back to the city that's given so much to me? And from my perspective, I don't think that I can leave any greater legacy than to help move the needle forward, whatever that means with regards to Pontiac. At whatever level it means. You know, politics wasn't necessarily ever in the cards for me, but here we are. I think that initially it would have been from an entrepreneurial standpoint, from an investment standpoint, maybe even from a volunteering standpoint, but for whatever reason, here's where we are, and I think that I can make a huge impact by doing it. I definitely want to help the people of Pontiac. I want to see those people grow. I want to see them become everything that a great city, a progressive city brings to the table. So I think, simply put, Chris Jackson is a person of the people. I'm of the belief that diversity is by far the most important thing that you can bring to the table. I think inclusiveness is really important, and you can't have inclusiveness without representation. And I think when you bring diversity to the table, it ultimately raises the IQ of the collective group. And I think that's the most important thing, is how smart can the collective group be to accomplish whatever goals that group ultimately sets. So for me, I've always been an explorer. I've always wanted to see different things. I had the opportunity to experience different cultures, whether it's from a social standpoint, from a business standpoint, and that's throughout the entire nation. And without that different perspective, I may be following the same trends that ultimately aren't getting us anywhere. In Pontiac, there was always this sense of we could do whatever we wanted to do growing up. I think that it was important that we had the right people around us to help cultivate ultimately what we wanted to become. And at that time, we had no idea some of the things that we wanted to accomplish. But you know, even if you had people that weren't necessarily always doing the right things around you, they cared enough about us that they would always make sure that we were doing the right things, that we would ultimately be better than the last generation that was in the city. And that was always the goal, it seemed like, you know, be better than the last generation so that at some point we can have a great city. But for us, it was a great city, right? We had an opportunity to be kids. You know, if there was any crime, we didn't experience much of it, right? Unless you went looking for trouble, there wasn't really any to be had. I owe a lot of that to my family, obviously. Having the right parenting definitely helped. Having the right community around us to protect us definitely helped. Playing sports and participating in sports. Having access to different town halls, event centers, recreational centers, like all of these things As we look back on it now, and especially given the current state of where Pontiac is, all of those things helped me become the man that I'm quickly becoming. And hopefully I can ultimately do great things and appreciate the city for doing that for us, right? So at the end of the day though, I think that I was reading a book called Outliers just recently. And this book spoke to an example of a tree in the forest. And this tree had a lot to go into it becoming what it ultimately became. And what I mean by that is it started as a seed, and a lot of things had to go right in order for this to ultimately become the mighty oak tree that we know today, right? So in other words, you had a seed in the soil, and it had to be the right level of soil. The rain ultimately had to not wash the soil, but cultivate it. And then the next part of that was a wild animal couldn't necessarily come and eat that seed, right? Because then it was over. Lumberjacks, had they come and tore down the tree in the process of its growth, we wouldn't see what it is today. So there are a number of things based on your environment, I think, that help you, if nothing else, give you the potential to ultimately be whatever it is you want it to be. And that's where we were, I think, as children growing up in the city. That's certainly something that I felt. And I think that it certainly helped me to this day. So.
Paid for by the committee to elect Chris Jackson.